The bra was sitting on my sofa like a confession I had forgotten to hide, and the moment Grace saw it, I knew my life was about to change. She stopped in the doorway of my apartment, stared at the piece of black lace lying beneath a cushion, and then slowly looked at me with eyes that seemed to carry years of disappointment. Her voice was quiet when she finally said, "So I'm not the only one, huh?" I wanted to laugh because the accusation was so completely wrong, but one look at her face told me this wasn't really about a bra. It was about trust, loneliness, and two people who had been pretending they didn't care about each other for far too long. Before we get into the story, if you believe people deserve kindness, second chances, and the opportunity to heal from their past, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear a story like this, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. You never know whose heart might need a little hope today. My name is Caleb, and I lived alone in a small apartment outside Portland, Oregon. My life was simple. I worked long hours as a building inspector, came home tired, cooked whatever required the least effort, and spent most evenings watching old movies with my rescue dog, Charlie. 2 years earlier, my fiancée had left me just weeks before our wedding. She hadn't cheated, and neither had I. She simply told me that somewhere along the way, she had stopped feeling like I was the person she wanted to spend her life with. There was no dramatic betrayal, no villain to hate. Just a quiet ending that somehow hurt more because nobody was guilty. After that, I stopped letting people get close. I told myself I was protecting my peace, but the truth was that I was afraid of being abandoned again. Grace lived in the apartment across the hall. She was 32, worked at a local children's clinic, and had a way of smiling at people even when she looked exhausted. We had been neighbors for almost a year, and during that time, our friendship had slowly become something neither of us had the courage to name. She borrowed sugar. I fixed her stubborn kitchen cabinet. She brought me homemade soup when I was sick. I helped her carry boxes when she moved furniture. Sometimes we'd sit outside on the building steps and talk until midnight, pretending neither of us noticed how easily the hours disappeared. There was an invisible line between us, and neither of us crossed it. Then came the Saturday night that changed everything. Grace had called me because her car wouldn't start, and after I helped her get it running, she insisted on bringing dinner to my apartment as thanks. We ate pizza, laughed about terrible dating stories, and stayed up talking. Eventually, Grace fell asleep on my sofa while watching a movie. I covered her with a blanket and went to bed. The next morning, she left early because she had an appointment, and I didn't think twice about the black garment she'd accidentally left behind after changing out of her work clothes the night before. I simply tossed it onto the sofa cushion, planning to give it back later. 3 days passed. On Wednesday evening, Grace knocked on my door. I opened it expecting another casual conversation, but she walked inside, noticed the bra immediately, and froze. Her expression changed so quickly that I could almost see the story forming inside her mind. When she asked whether someone else had been there, I realized she had completely misunderstood. I explained that it was hers, that she'd left it behind after changing, but she didn't believe me at first. Her eyes filled with embarrassment, then anger, and finally something much deeper. She admitted that she'd been afraid of exactly this. Grace had once been married to a man who constantly made her feel replaceable. He had cheated on her repeatedly and convinced her that she was never enough. After their divorce, she promised herself she would never again trust someone so easily. She had started caring about me, but every time she considered getting closer, fear reminded her of the past. That tiny piece of clothing had simply become the excuse her wounded heart needed to protect itself. I sat across from her and told her the truth I'd never told anyone in our building. I was afraid too. I was afraid that if I let myself love someone again, I'd eventually wake up alone. I admitted that I'd been falling for her for months but was too scared to say it because I didn't want to lose the friendship we already had. Grace looked at me for a long moment, and for the first time, neither of us tried to hide behind a joke. That night didn't end with some perfect romantic confession. It ended with Grace crying quietly while I sat beside her, giving her the space to breathe. We talked until nearly sunrise. We talked about betrayal, loneliness, family, failed relationships, and all the ways people learn to build walls around their hearts. Somewhere between the silence and the tears, we realized something important: neither of us needed someone perfect. We needed someone willing to be honest. Over the next few months, things changed slowly. We didn't rush into a relationship. We went on simple dates, took Charlie to the park, cooked together, and learned each other's habits. When Grace became frightened, she told me instead of disappearing. When I felt insecure, I stopped pretending I was fine. We learned that trust wasn't a promise you made once. It was something you built through hundreds of ordinary moments. 6 months later, we returned to the same sofa where everything had started. Grace laughed when she remembered the misunderstanding and shook her head. She told me that she'd never imagined a forgotten piece of clothing could lead to the most honest conversation of her life. I smiled and told her that sometimes the things we desperately try to hide are exactly what force us to tell the truth. A year later, I asked Grace to marry me, not with an extravagant proposal, but in the little apartment where we'd learned how to trust each other. She said yes before I finished the question. Charlie barked as if he'd been waiting for the moment too. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more stories about love, healing, and unexpected moments that change our lives. And before the story ends, I want you to comment one word: trust. Because sometimes the greatest love story isn't about finding someone who has never been hurt. It's about finding someone who has been hurt and still chooses to believe that love can be safe again. Grace once thought that black bra on my sofa proved she was just another woman in my life. She was wrong. It wasn't proof that there was someone else. It was proof that two lonely people had finally found the courage to stop running from what they felt. And sometimes, the most beautiful beginning can come from the most misunderstood moment.